everyone, I'm Ellen from Classroom Unbound, and today I'm going to share with you what I read in June. Okay, so my goal every month is to basically read 3 types of books. One nonfiction book, one fiction book, and then one like maybe self-help book. And June, I actually met my goal, so I'm super excited. Today's reading wrap up is brought to you by Tazo Awake English Breakfast Tea. The first book I read this month was Where the Crawdads Sing by Delilah Owens, and this one I listened to on audio. So I like to get some readings in with audiobooks because it's easy for me to do that while I'm either running or cleaning or showering or cooking. It's just a really easy way to get in more reading. So this was my audiobook for the month. This book takes place in the 1960s in the South, and if you have ever lived in the South or have visited the South and in some way enjoy the landscape, the scenery, I think that you will love this book. Without even knowing anything else about it. So it is a murder mystery, but also like a coming of age story, and I didn't actually think I would like it. I'm not usually the murder mystery type of person, but I actually really did enjoy this book. So it is about a girl, Kaya. She lives in the marsh and basically is accused of murdering someone, and so the book flips back and forth between her growing up and then the trial for murder, and it goes into how she basically had to teach herself and to raise herself. Her entire family ends up leaving her before the age of 10, and she lives alone, and so it's a story of survival, how she grew up, and a little bit of a love story as well, because she does end up falling in love with someone or more than one person. But I just felt like this book is really, really interesting, especially listening to it on Audible. There's just something about having a book read to you. I don't think that the love of having a book read to you ever really leaves from childhood. So, you know, there were times where I was listening to the story and would just close my eyes and imagine myself there in the marsh with Kaya, seeing the birds and seeing the water, hearing the water, and it was really interesting. I lived in the South very, very early. I was born in Florida and lived for some time in Mississippi, but you know, just this book kind of took me back. I've also visited the South numerous times. My father's side of the family is from the South, but this book kind of takes me back to living there, to experiencing just the scenery there. So if you are a nature lover, if you like murder mystery, if you like books on being lonely, and I think that you'll love this one. So definitely recommend this one. My next reading for June was probably one of my most 5 favorite books, and it's The Alchemist by I don't want to ruin his name, but I don't quite know how to pronounce it. Paulo Coelho. I think that's how you say his name. I think I've read this book probably 6 or 7 times, and I always find myself coming back to it when something in my life is kind of, I'm questioning things, maybe I could say it that way, or somehow I'm very stressed in my life. I find myself going back to this book and reading it. So like I said, I've read it 6 or 7 times, maybe even more, I don't know. But this is definitely a favorite of mine. This story is about a boy named Santiago, and he is a shepherd, and he is basically trying to follow his dream, his personal legend, his purpose in life, whatever you may call it. And I like the story, although it is simple. It just has reminders in there on listening to our hearts, recognizing opportunity, following your dreams, your passions. So I find myself reading this one whenever I have not a crisis, but just a moment where I'm like, what am I doing? What is the purpose in all of this? So it's a quick read, and definitely recommend at least one time to everyone, just for those reminders on listening to your inner self. The last book I read this month was the One World Schoolhouse by Salman Khan. And if you are familiar with Khan Academy, this is the founder of Khan Academy. And I enjoyed this book. I took so many notes. I wrote them all down in here while reading. I partially read this one and partially listened to it on Audible. He actually narrates it on Audible, so then it was nice listening to him read it. I find that listening to Audible books narrated by the author is even better because they know the message, they know better the pauses, where the emphasis should be. So I do like listening, or I prefer listening to books narrated by the author to hear their perspective or their voice. So this one basically had three major parts. He broke down like the history of education, where it is today and where it can be in the future. He also talked a lot about his website, his goals with the website, the history of it, how it came to be, and where he sees it going in the future. So Khan describes how our current model of education is not working. And I think that as a homeschooler, and probably speaking to a lot of fellow homeschoolers, we can agree on that. He goes a little bit into the Prussian model of education, which is where we got our current model of education, and how it was basically designed because they needed a stronger military, and we modeled after that, but that's not our main goal, so we should also not then be following it. Khan goes on to describe how the model of education that was created in the 1800s has not changed much in the past almost 200 years, but our lives have vastly changed. The way that we live, the way that we work, the way that we play has drastically changed, and so too then should our education system. He also talks about how the length of time that children spend in the classroom or even on independent subjects is as arbitrary as us having 3 meals a day. Someone came up with that one day, that's what we've been following. That doesn't mean that this is a scientific fact. This is we have to hold true to this forever. He describes his goal for a free, world-class access to information type of education. One of the parts that resonated with me was his discussion on the grading system in America, as far as having passing grades versus not passing, the ABCDF. I don't do grades in my homeschool. I teach to mastery, and he discusses this a little bit in his book, and he talks about how it is important to teach to mastery and not to teach to certain grades, because, and the example he gave was for math, if you for instance have a child or student who gets maybe an 85% or a 90% on whatever chapter, whatever lesson, whatever subject, and then you say, yay, you have a passing grade, you can move on, there's 10 to 15% that the student is missing, that they're not getting. And these could be very foundational things that to where you move on to the next subject, they're missing 10 to 15% of something. And so when they get to the next thing, they may struggle in an area. But let's say they score an 80% there, well, they're technically passing. Then you go on to the next one, but there was 20% that they were missing. So as they keep going on, that's why in the later years they start failing or they start hating math, because they were missing those foundational things. So I think that kind of reinforced my reasoning for teaching to mastery and the importance of teaching to mastery, because you want them to be able to go on to the next thing. Those, I feel like the most important subjects would be math and reading, because they build upon each other as you keep advancing. So you definitely need to have those foundational skills in order to move on. I don't think that it's as important in subjects maybe like history or something. If you miss a date here or there, you can get that again later. But as far as the reading and the math, those are the very foundational things where you absolutely need to have those stepping stones that build upon each other in order to move on to the next. I think that anyone involved in any way in education should definitely take a look at this book. Even if you do not homeschool, you can use a lot of these concepts in this book to help your student at home, after school, and even if your student's teacher doesn't teach to mastery, you can still do that at home. You don't necessarily have to homeschool in order to do that, but you can definitely still make sure your child understands all those basic foundational things. Basically, this is Khan's call for a universal global education that is free, that can be accessed by anyone. And I felt he did a really good job talking about why our current model is not working, and then some ideas on how to improve it. Those were my reads for June 2019. Have you read any of these books? What are your thoughts? And if you read something very interesting, let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.